All right. Hello. This is Grayson Liebhart. I'm a pitching trainer at DriveLine in Arizona. Caden told me that Grayson wanted some video to be reviewed and kind of biomech breakdown as well. Obviously he's a hitting trainer, so me as a pitching trainer got a little bit more in-depth advice and can give just a little bit more of an in-depth breakdown. My name's also Grayson, kind of a coincidence. Thought that was funny. But first thing, I'll just kind of let this video play and then I'll dive into that breakdown real quick. All right. First things first, I was really impressed that Grayson was able to throw 74 miles an hour, especially as a 14-year-old. That's pretty above average. So definitely pat yourself a little bit on the back for that. Assuming that Caden went over the high performance stuff, um, just gonna kind of go into the breakdown first. So yeah, let's get into that. Kind of got a weird view here. Let's see. There we go. All right. So just kind of give a brief overview of how this kind of system works. 100 is going to be average for our 90 plus mile an hour group, which is pretty elite. So that's our elite group. 100 is going to be average. So Grayson is being compared to a pretty good sample size here and pretty good reference group. We can see here that based off the his throws in gym, his average was 73.4. Based off of purely mechanics, if he just increased or developed his mechanics a little bit better, cleaned some things up, his estimated mechanical ceiling as of right now is 78.6 miles an hour. This isn't like his physiological max or anything like that. This does not take into consideration age, strength, anything like that. So this is just purely based off mechanics, how hard we expect Grayson to throw if he just cleans up his mechanics a bit. Is probably around that 100 range. So 100 being average, anything below is going to be below average compared to that 90 plus mile an hour group, and then anything above is going to be above average for that 90 plus mile an hour group. Obviously, Grayson is not at the age or size to be able to throw 90 miles an hour. Just not a thing with 14-year-olds. He's got a lot of time to grow, develop, just overall get bigger, stronger, faster. So some things that are kind of cool to note is this lead leg block. This is one of the buckets for our mechanical scores. 105 is above average and really good, honestly, for a 14-year-old. Like that's pretty dang impressive to be better than honestly like some pro guys block. So definitely pat yourself a little bit on the back there, Grayson. Good work. That's pretty cool to see. Then we've got about an average arm action at 100 here, posture at a 91, rotation at a 91, and then center of gravity at a 99, which brings us to a total of 96. Honestly, I think there's a lot more in the tank for Grayson. Um, Already like a good foundation to throw. Block is pretty good. I'm going to break down each of these a little bit more in depth, but overall, good start to build off of. Um, so center of gravity, basically what we were looking at here is how fast does Grayson move down the mound, then how well is he able to decelerate when that front foot hits and transfer energy up the chain efficiently. So max COG velo, this is basically how fast he's accelerating at his peak speed down the mound, and that is going to be 2.69 meters per second compared to 2.85 for the median elite group. Um, I wouldn't be too concerned about this. This is pretty common for a kid his age. There's definitely a little bit of room for growth, but as he gets bigger, stronger, is able to rotate a little bit faster, I anticipate these scores to go up, especially just getting older and stronger. Over time, those will kind of naturally tick up, but if anything, I would just tell him to kind of maintain a little bit more velocity down the mound, move down the mound a little bit quicker. So one kind of cue for that is if at peak leg lift, he should feel like he's already drifting down the mound. So I can kind of describe this here in the throw. So when he's at peak knee height right here ish, So right when he gets there, you can see he's already got a little bit of a drift going, but we'd like to see a little bit more of not necessarily an aggressive drift, but just a little bit quicker. One thing that kind of impacts him as well is his trunk kind of staying back here rather than stacked over the pelvis. That's something that we would like to clean up, but he does compensate for it pretty well by getting out of it when that front foot hits. So you can see that trunk is kind of stacked there, but he's losing a little bit of that momentum due to that lack of trunk stack over the pelvis. Deceleration, this ties really highly into lead leg block, so I'll kind of get into this in a second. But posture wise, this is going to mainly be covering hip shoulder separation. So hip shoulder separation at foot plant is basically we're taking the angle of how open his hips are when that front foot hits compared to how closed his shoulders are. So what does that mean for the throw? Basically, the more separation we can create, let's say my hips are completely open and my shoulder or my upper half is completely closed, the more stretch we are able to create here, the more time we have to accelerate through the throw. And the more time you have to accelerate through the throw, hopefully the faster it is, especially with those rotational velocities. The bigger stretch we can create, it's like a rubber band effect, right? So once we stretch that rubber band and then you let it go, that's like the initiation of the throw. Or letting go of that rubber band, the further you stretch it, the faster it'll go. Is essentially the main idea with hip shoulder separation. Peak torso counter rotation, we're a little bit light here, so one cue you can kind of give them is if you've ever watched Tim Lincecum or let's say, who was I thinking of? For example, a lot of guys will, when they throw, they'll turn their back completely and then go. Basically, what we're looking for is just kind of rotate that torso a little bit more so we can create a little bit more separation. And you can see that with the torso rotation at foot plant, we're just a little bit too open at foot plant here, 10 degrees compared to 2. I can show this in the throw here, but we are looking at when that front foot hits right about there. You can see that front shoulder is just kind of pulling them open just a little bit early. So if we can keep that trunk counter rotated just a little bit longer, it'll force that rotation to happen a bit quicker. So that's kind of what's going to lead to those rotational velos going up, which I'll cover in a second. But that's kind of what I mean by hip shoulder separation. His hips are in a pretty good spot here, but like I said, those shoulders just a little too open. So then most of the rest of this looks pretty good. Nothing too concerning. Forward tilt, pretty on par. So yeah, let's look at lead leg block. Pretty good. Like I said, lead knee extension above average. That's essentially when that front knee hits. Are we extending or are we flexing into it? Ideally, we are extending, and he's doing that at an above average clip. So that's pretty impressive. Good for his age. Over time, you'll kind of see the COG deceleration above expected go up, meaning he can transfer that energy a little bit more efficiently just because he'll be getting stronger. That's going to be the biggest thing once he gets stronger. This lead knee extension velocity is going to tick up too, and then you'll even see that lead knee extension increase by a bit more, which would be pretty impressive. So as he gets older, stronger, that lead leg block is going to get even better, which is awesome. And I'll kind of show that in the video here. So we see once that front foot hits, instead of kind of bending into flexion, we're going into extension, which is exactly what we want. So right there, rather than bending into flexion, he's extending through the throw, which is awesome to see. Rotation, like I said, this highly is tied into hip shoulder separation. The more separation he's going to get, the faster you'll be able to rotate. There's going to be a few ways you can do that. You know, there's drop steps, roll-ins, a bunch of different drills to kind of train hip shoulder separation, and then just throwing high intent more often, honestly. Obviously, you want to stay safe and don't do that at a clip that is too high or too often. Also want to, monitor volume a bit, but that's going to be the biggest thing for him is just this rotation going up. And by increasing hip shoulder separation, these numbers should go up. Same thing with him just getting faster and stronger. The stronger you are, the more rotational velocity you're able to create because Think about it this way. If you're doing a med ball slam, like a swing from the side, like lateral, you're doing it like a scoop toss here, you're just going bam. The faster you can do that, usually the stronger you are, right? So that's going to be the biggest thing for him. Pelvis rotation looks great. He's rotating his pelvis at a good pace. Um, but this isn't a huge correlator into ball velocity. Torso rotational velocity is going to be a much higher correlator to ball velocity. Kind of looking at arm action here, pretty solid for the most part. Layback is just how far we're able to get back into this position. So this wrist kind of bending back while this elbow is staying here. How far are we able to bend into that range of motion? Could be a range of motion limiting him a little bit, but I would just have him throw some overloads. That's going to be the biggest way to help this. Just throw some heavier plyos. Elbow extension's pretty good. Shoulder abduction a little high. So what this is telling us, shoulder abduction at foot plant is essentially this angle right here. So you can kind of see his arm is hiking up a little bit. We would like to see that at 85 degrees rather than 97. So if we can get a little bit below, right? So being like right about here rather than up here, if that makes sense, is going to be really important. One, it's just healthier. There's a couple studies that have shown that once you kind of start climbing above that 90 degrees, they're increasing risk for injury, which no one wants, especially for their 14-year-old kid. Um, so I would just have him do pivot picks with his elbow starting a little bit lower, and just counter rotate into it and then rotate through the throw. That way he'll really be able to feel this arm being a little bit lower and not have to consciously think about it outside of that drill. And it should translate into his actual throws. So, elbow extension velocity looks great. Already covered shoulder abduction at foot plant. Scap load, pretty close to where we want to be. That's essentially going to be how far we can drive this elbow back through the throw. The key thing here is we are looking for that one position, yes, but what's more important is the sequencing of it. So the timing. We don't want to sit back in here forever and then go because we're going to lose some of that elasticity. If we can go further back into it and then out quickly, that's going to be much more efficient and increase of the velocity as well. Shoulder rotation velocity looks good. Elbow flexion at foot plant. This is going to be interesting. So at foot plant, we see he's inside 90 here with this forearm in relation to this right here. Essentially, he's too far inside 90. This is a better problem to have, I guess, than being outside 90. That would cause more issues. Forearm fly out, we'd start cutting the ball. But if you're inside 90 there, not too bad. We just would like to see it be a little bit closer to 90. It can cause forearm fly out being too close inside 90 as well, because then you only really have like this direction to go, and then you can also start cutting the ball. But as you can see in the video here, not too bad of a problem because he gets that shoulder abduction, so he just starts to climb out of it. Instead, what we would like to see is that shoulder abduction being a little bit lower, being a little bit closer to 90, so then he can just follow through the ball rather than almost climbing into that throw. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. One thing I always like to show people is this appendix showing what the relative importance is in relation to ball velocity. And as I said earlier, the biggest thing is going to be torso rotation velo. So getting stronger, getting bigger, and then really working on that hip shoulder separation is going to give Grayson the biggest chance to throw harder. That's going to be his lowest hanging fruit. There's always other stuff to address. I'm assuming Caden already went through the high performance data. So you already know he needs to get stronger. He needs to get bigger. Maybe some limiting range of motion, but overall in a good spot for being 14. Like throwing 74, like I said, as a 14-year-old is pretty dang impressive. So good work, Grayson. That's about all I got for you. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.